Welcome to our Provident webinar series. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing not one, but two guest speakers from Sourcewell. Have you ever wondered how you can save money through cooperative purchasing and even eliminate having to conduct your own bid or bid on behalf of your client for the products or services you want to purchase? Well, I believe Sourcewell could be a helpful tool for you. Not only can you take advantage of our accident and health insurance needs with Provident by using our awarded contract with Sourcewell, you can take advantage of 52 other public safety contracts through Sourcewell as well. I'll let Crosby, Grindle, and Ryan Donovan tell you more about themselves and who Sourcewell is. More importantly, tell you how Sourcewell's cooperative purchasing program can help you. If you've not listened to our informative podcast episode with Crosby via our Station 19.0 podcast from December, you should take the time to listen in. There'll be a link to describe to our podcast in the email that you'll get sent to you tomorrow. You can also preview previous webinars at www.providentins using the Training Resources tab in the upper right-hand corner of the page. Some special notes to our listeners. Within the next day, we'll provide you with the slides from tonight, as well as a link to watch the recording. However, to receive your certificate of attendance, you must be present for the entirety of this webinar. Due to the number of people participating tonight, we may not get to all your questions. We are going to try to capture any questions we don't get to tonight and get you answers in the next few days. If we don't get answers to you by Monday, February the 19th, please don't hesitate to contact me at eman@providentins.com, and we'll get them answered. For those departments hosting this webinar for their entire department, please send us an Excel spreadsheet with the first name, last name, and email address. Again, please, if you can send it in a spreadsheet, first name, last name, and an email address, it makes it easier for me to get the certificates done. And while I'm thinking of it, please note, I'll be on the road tomorrow driving to Charlotte for a meeting all day on Saturday. So it could be Tuesday of next week before you actually see your certificate. So just be patient. So I'm going to go through and introduce everybody to what Provident is. Provident Insurance actually started as an independent insurance company in 1902. In the Pittsburgh area. In 1928, they began serving volunteer fire departments with a customized accident and health policy. Today, we provide volunteer firefighters, combination career firefighters, and emergency medical responders with a multitude of programs. We now also offer insurance to law enforcement and special risk programs. Provident's been voted as one of the best insurance businesses to work for 6 years in a row now by the Insurance Business Magazine. A little bit about our programs. The accident and health program is, in a lot of states, is known as a fireman's relief policy. It provides benefits to your members if they're injured doing things on behalf of your organization. And it entitles those members and the immediate members of their families access to our first responder assistance program. We have a 24-hour accidental death and dismemberment policy, which, if you were to purchase, covers your members for accidental death when they're off duty and while they're on duty as well. We have a group term life policy you can purchase for your organizations. We have a critical illness cancer policy that you can purchase that pays a living benefit if an individual's diagnosed with cancer, renal failure, a heart attack, or a stroke. And then, of course, we have our Fire Plus property and casualty insurance program. And if you're a property and casualty client, you would have access to our Fire Plus online training academy with over 800 courses. Tonight, as I said, I have the pleasure of introducing Crosby and Ryan to our program from Sourcewell.
Thank you, Ed. I'm going to get our presentation up here for us. Here we go. Ed, are you seeing the right screen there? Oh, you're muted.
You have to bring the full slide presentation up. I can see the slides, but it looks like you're in a preview mode.
All right. Well, that's why I asked. Here we go. Let's see here. You like that better?
There you go.
Thanks, everybody. All right, we practiced this, and we thought it'd be fun to demonstrate that we're not always perfect by having a little glitch at the beginning. Well, thank you for that introduction, Ed. My name is Crosby Grindle, and I have the pleasure of speaking with you tonight a little bit about cooperative purchasing and cooperative procurement, and how this can be a benefit to you, whether you're an end user, a government purchaser, or whether you're selling to government employees. And I'm passionate about this topic because I've had the pleasure of being on all sides of this equation. I worked in the government service for many years, worked in the fire service, wearing the uniform, both for volunteer and career agencies, and was a chief officer before working at a national level with various organizations like the IAFC and NFPA. And then about the last 20 years, I've been involved with cooperative purchasing, leading cooperative purchasing organizations and efforts to bring cooperative purchasing to the public safety arena. So none of that makes me famous, but it makes me maybe qualified to speak to you a little bit tonight about cooperative purchasing and public safety. And then I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter, Ryan, to introduce himself.
All right. Thank you, Crosby. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for hosting us. As Crosby said, my name is Ryan Donovan. You can see on the slide what my title is, but basically I'm responsible for the programs, contracts, and offerings related to risk management, employee benefits, and insurance. We're absolutely thrilled to be working with Provident to help bring their products and services to you in a quick, compliant, and convenient way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. So let's jump into our agenda. I always like to let people know what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to first talk a little bit about procurement, and because we got to lay some groundwork so we can then talk about cooperative purchasing and how that applies to you and how you can leverage that in your agency to provide you with greater choice and have a much better time with your procurement process. Then we're going to transition a little bit into talking about Sourcewell, which is a governmental entity providing you a no-cost government-to-government solution. And Ryan's going to talk about that, and then specifically the employee benefit options as it relates to Provident Insurance here. So let's dive into the content. So first of all, in general, you have two buying questions. What are you going to buy, and how are you going to buy it? And I recognize that our audience tonight probably includes both people buying things and people selling things. I'll put it in simple terms like that. So a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you is valuable on either side of that equation. You just kind of have to think about it from your perspective. But for those two questions, what are you going to buy and how are you going to buy it? Well, what are you going to buy? That's pretty easy. There's lots of people out there telling you what we should have in the fire service. And we're not going to get into that tonight. We're going to talk about how you're going to buy it. And above threshold options, so that's for things that cost a lot of money, that require a special procurement process we're going to talk about. You usually have about three options. You can conduct your own RFP process, you can do a sole source, some kind of sole source procurement, or you can use a contract to meet the procurement requirements, either of your customer, or if you're the government agency or a volunteer fire department, they can be used to meet your procurement requirements. Now, as I said, I've been in the fire service for a long time and in the cooperative procurement industry for a long time. I've never met anybody yet that said they got into the fire service because they love conducting that RFP procurement process. So tonight we're going to give you some other options, so maybe you don't have to do that. But first, what is public procurement? So at its core level, public procurement is about buying what you need to be able to serve the community that you serve in an efficient way while you ensure appropriate use of dollars. Now, this applies to volunteer agencies as well. I love seeing all the folks coming up on the chat saying where they're from. And I know there's some volunteer agencies out there. Again, I used to serve on volunteer agencies myself years ago. A lot of volunteer agencies still have to follow public procurement requirements, or at least do follow some level of transparency because they're generating funds either through local fundraising, or they might generate some funds from the communities they serve or even the municipalities they serve. And it's really prudent for them as a volunteer agency to still be able to demonstrate that they are having some fiduciary responsibility with their public procurement process. And that fiduciary responsibility, I think we often forget about in the fire service. We think about the incredible commitment and responsibility we have to save lives and property, but we do that by buying stuff. And there's still a financial component to the agencies that we manage. And so that fiduciary responsibility is shared by fire service leaders as well as by procurement officials who assist those fire service leaders. So I like to remind people that that fiduciary responsibility is not something you go, oh yeah, that's a procurement official. They're the ones that are keeping me from buying what I want to buy. No, we're in the same boat here. They're the ones that are helping you make sure that you're following your responsibilities and your fiduciary responsibilities and maintaining that public trust and confidence, which I know everyone on this call can appreciate. And if you are selling to the public safety space, then it's important to understand and respect that process as well. And sometimes as sellers or brokers in this space, you're going to have to help your customers understand their procurement policy, because believe it or not everybody does. And so let's talk a little about understanding the procurement policy on both sides of this equation. It's amazing to me working in this space how often we'll get questions about our procurement policy, sometimes from procurement officials, sometimes from fire chiefs saying, hey, can you help me understand my procurement policy? Can I use a cooperative contract in my procurement policy? So I challenge fire service leaders to ask them this question. Have you seen your procurement policy? All too often in the fire service, we hand things down right through history. And what we've done, we do things this way because we've always done them that way. And often fire chiefs come into their position and they learn about their procurement policy by talking to the previous fire chief or to their administrative official or administrative staff people. And that's great. Those folks know a lot. But it's important for you to make sure your procurement policy is up to date and that you've seen it. You understand your authority levels. And when I say up to date, there's state statutes that impact local procurement policies, and those get challenged and changed all the time. So even though you might say, oh yeah, I've looked at my procurement policy, I'm very familiar with it, you need to look at it and see and make sure it's up to date. Talk to your procurement official or whoever's responsible for that, or your attorney if you're a volunteer fire agency or a fire district, and just spend a little bit of time making sure that your procurement policy is understood by you, and that you understand whether your process allows you to buy things on a best value type process versus only a lowest price type process. And we're going to talk about that in just a second, because that will impact potentially your ability to use cooperative contracts. And again, I'm going to reiterate, this applies to those of you on this webinar that are selling to local government and fire service too, because it helps for you to understand your customer's procurement policy, because that's going to allow you to tailor your sale process and understand that sale process. And quite frankly, understand whether you can use a co-op contract like your Sourcewell contract as a solution to take the friction out of the buying process. So the next really exciting procurement slide I have, and I promise it gets better, is thresholds. So spending thresholds refer to the range under which you have to look at your procurement policy and understand your procurement process. So this arrow on the side here represents that this goes up and down. Most agencies, now this I recognize people on this call from all over the country, so I'm speaking very generally, and ultimately your procurement policy is dictated by state statute and your local policy. So ultimately you have to understand this on your own. But essentially what we notice nationally is that usually there's a lower limit. Below that, you can make purchases as you choose as leaders of your organization. Usually it's a few $1,000s. And then there's usually an upper limit of a few tens of thousands of bucks. In between there is that documented process. That's often the informal quotes we hear about. Oh, I have to do something. I just have to get 3 quotes. Well, how do you get those 3 quotes? Do you document that anyway? How did you solicit those 3 quotes? How are they recorded? There's still some questions that you probably need to answer for yourself if you're responsible for your procurement policy. And then above that upper limit, that's the thing that you really don't love doing, I'm guessing, as a fire chief. You then need to do some kind of formal RFP process. This is a thing that takes a long time. And most of us don't really enjoy doing that, except for some of those of us in the actual procurement industry, right? So those thresholds are important because cooperative purchasing is designed to satisfy the procurement requirements at the highest level, above that upper limit, which means it also satisfies, those contracts satisfy basically all of those procurement thresholds. So it's a really powerful tool. So let's dig into cooperative purchasing for a minute then. What is it and what is it designed to do? Essentially, cooperative purchasing is about sharing resources between governments. The best example I can give you in the fire service is like mutual aid, right? So you undoubtedly, if you're on this call representing a fire agency, you undoubtedly have a mutual aid agreement with a neighboring jurisdiction, and you trust each other to come in and help each other out and perform on the fire ground in a mutually beneficial way. Even if you didn't train together, even if you train to do things slightly differently, you're sharing that effort together. And that's really what cooperative purchasing is. It's using the work of another government agency to take the contract they created in a special way to satisfy your procurement requirements. And this way it connects the buyers and the sellers. So it's kind of it's a fun business for us because we get to be an interface between all the supplier community and all of the public safety and government community and create efficiencies and savings, both time and money, which is really nice, right? Because time is money, but a lot of times you get better pricing too, because contracts represent national pricing rather than the pricing you get if you just did this on your own. And probably the best part, especially for the public safety community, is you usually work with your local supplier. And I understand as well as anyone that we rely on our local suppliers and our local relationships because they're the folks that come out nights and weekends to train and answer questions and fix things and work with us on employee benefits and tricky issues like that. So cooperative purchasing is a great resource for the public safety community. Sometimes it's called things like piggybacking or bridging. I've heard frame agreements used. Consortium is a term used, especially in the fire apparatus industry. Sometimes you'll hear GPOs, group purchasing organizations. You do need to be mindful if you see a GPO that it is one designed to work in the government space, because GPOs also refer to private sector and hospital type group purchasing organizations. But those are all terms that you might see when you're working on a cooperative procurement opportunity. And this isn't something that like I just came up with and decided it was a good thing to talk about as a consultant in this space. This is something that's an established practice. It's been around now for a couple of decades. In fact, the American Bar Association has a model procurement code that specifically calls out and defines cooperative purchasing. And in fact, there's some examples of procurement policy that you could adopt if you don't have a solid procurement policy that addresses cooperative purchasing that's available through that model procurement code from the American Bar Association. And not only is this not something we just created, but this is something that a lot of governments are using, and it's trending upwards. So this graph, us consultants and speakers like to have graphs to prove that we're right? So this data here that was collected by a government research organization demonstrates the growth of cooperative purchasing. And you can see that this year we're almost $60 billion in total sales by state and local governments through cooperative contracts. So a significant amount of spend is going through cooperative purchasing. There's a really good chance that governments you work with are already using cooperative purchasing and you might not even realize it. All right, as I start to get towards the end of my time, I have a visual representation of this process. I mentioned I was in the fire service. I used to be a training chief. I know we're visual learners in the fire service community, so here's my rudimentary attempt to represent this. So the first block there, you define the need of what it is you need to buy, and then you create the specs. We know in the fire service, a lot of times this takes a while, right? We put a team together to work on that, and that can take quite a bit. Then we do the RFP, the solicitation process, the thing we don't love doing, and that takes however long that takes, probably quite a few months, and then you finally get to place the order and eventually take delivery. And we know, especially with supply chain issues, that can take a bit as well. So whatever that time is there, those are all the elements of that. And quite often, that whole process is a year or more, depending on what it is you're procuring. So imagine you use a cooperative contract in place of that RFP process. You'll notice the spec block got smaller. That's because cooperative contracts already have all the products available on contract. They're usually designed as a catalog type contract, so it's a little bit easier because you're picking from options rather than having to spell out everything you want from a blank sheet. Then you insert that cooperative contract and you get to place the order, and what that means is you save time. And usually you save quite a bit of time in that process. And that's a really tremendous advantage, especially with supply chain issues, to get your order placed that much more quickly. The most important thing to take away from this, though, is this whole process is designed to satisfy your procurement requirements. And if you take nothing else away from this, please remember that don't go back. If you're not the procurement official or if you're selling into this space, don't bring up a cooperative contract and say, hey, this is a way we can get around your procurement process or skip your RFP process. Those aren't words and language that procurement folks want to hear. They want to hear that you understand, well, this is how we satisfy your procurement requirements and your procurement process through a contract that was designed to do that. And in the process, save you a little bit of time. And for those with the fire service, give you choice. All right. So what is Sourcewell doing in this space, and why should you care if you sell products into the government space or if you are in the fire service space? Well, and I'm going to say we at Sourcewell, because I've been working with Sourcewell for the last 5 years to help expand their public safety initiative. And Sourcewell's been around for a long time. Ryan's going to talk more about that here in just a second. And they have a tremendous footprint in the public safety space and in the government space. But that public safety footprint has expanded recently because we've added a whole bunch of contracts. We have over 100 contracts from these solicitation categories you see on the screen that have been created to serve the public safety community. And of course, they're all available through the Sourcewell website and through your local dealer or manufacturer. And because of that, it means that the public safety community is a lot more used to and familiar with Sourcewell and trust Sourcewell as their government procurement partner. In fact, a lot of public safety associations that have created cooperative purchasing organizations have moved all that over to Sourcewell recently. And that's because Sourcewell represents really the best in cooperative purchasing on a national level. And a lot of it's because they are a government, and they're a government helping other governments and providing those governments with a no-cost solution that improves efficiencies and does all the things that cooperative contracts do. So I'm pretty excited to be a part of Sourcewell and the Sourcewell team, and feel privileged to be able to deliver that message. And going to turn this over to Ryan now to tell you a little bit more about Sourcewell. So thank you,
Thanks.
Ryan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Crosby. There's actually a question in the chat that I think's worth addressing related to procurement. Spending thresholds. Is a spending threshold, is that calculated on like a broad category throughout the year, or is it on individual purchases, or does that vary state to state, government to government?
Yes, to all those, because as we know, government and especially the fire service is a local phenomenon. So the answer to that question depends on your procurement policy in your state. Spending thresholds are often dictated at the state level. The state will indicate what those thresholds are, and then a local procurement policy will usually adopt that, or at least put a little more framework around that and explain things like, that's a great question, Kristen, is that threshold for the whole year? Or is that per purchase or per procurement or per vendor? And so those you're basically asking the right questions, but ultimately that's, we have to push that back to you and your procurement policy and your interpretation of your procurement policy. And once you have that, then people at Sourcewell can help you walk through that and how that relates to a Sourcewell contract. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Crosby. So let me give you a high-level overview of what Sourcewell is and who it is that we serve. So first of all, Crosby mentioned it earlier, but it's important to understand that Sourcewell is government. We're a self-sustaining government organization that partners with schools and other local governments with a mission of boosting student and community success. Sourcewell was established in 1978, and I believe our cooperative purchasing program got started in the early 2000s, with maybe our first contracts be awarded in 2003. And that is what we're most known for around the country, is our cooperative purchasing program. Exactly what Crosby just gave you this great overview of. Sourcewell does a lot of other things to support public entities, especially in the 5-county region of central Minnesota. But for this webinar, we're going to focus on what's most relevant to y'all, which is that national cooperative purchasing program. More than 50,000 public entities have registered with us as a participating agency. This is going to include tiny rural townships to mid-sized school districts, even entire university systems like the University of Texas, the Port Authority of Los Angeles. So basically, if you're government, small or large, and you have the ability to utilize cooperative contracts, you can register as a participating agency with Sourcewell. And many of those agencies choose to use cooperative contracts like with us because, like us, and just like you, we're government. And because we're government, we can and we do conduct our own competitive solicitations, which can be yours. We are the lead agency on all of our cooperative contracts. And what that means to you is it's consistent and standardized. So when you make a purchase via a Sourcewell contract, you can trust the process and you can be comfortable with the consistent documentation. We like to say at Sourcewell, with cooperative purchasing, that makes RFP mean ready for purchase. So we're really here to try to help streamline things for you. Can you give me the next slide, Crosby? All right. So I want to talk a little bit about why we went to bid in the category of employee benefits. Well, first and foremost, governments need these types of benefits in order to attract and retain talent. Public sector, you're all not shielded from the competitive employer marketplace. You all compete with other governments, and you're competing with the private sector over talented people. And a strong employee benefit program is one strategy to attract and retain quality folks. And secondly, we really want to advocate for the public employee. We want to ensure that they have access to quality employee benefits that will protect themselves and their loved ones in times of need. So we went to bid for these benefits because our participating agencies, public sector in general, told us there's a need, and especially in the public safety area. It's very difficult to get coverage. Many companies out there will provide group life, disability, worksite, all the types of employee benefits that you're used to, but they might exclude public safety or price it up or have it be a small proportion of a larger municipality. So there is clearly a gap and an opportunity. And we were so pleased to award a contract to Provident. Not only do they provide the strong and reliable coverage that you're seeking, but they also couple that with outstanding customer service, which is based on many, many years of public sector experience. And they do fully plan to ensure public safety and public entities in general. So now that you got a high level understanding of the what and the why, let's talk a little bit more about the how. How do you get started with Sourcewell's cooperative purchasing program? So first of all, you're just going to want to check and see if your agency is registered, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. But I want to emphasize some of the high points of being registered as a participating agency with your organization. First of all, there's no cost, and you have no obligation or liability by getting registered with us. Just use that account registration number when you need to make a convenient and compliant purchase. The registration saves the time and the resources that it takes to write, publish, advertise, evaluate, not to mention the risk of any protests by competing companies. The competitive process has already been done for you. All that solicitation documentation, response documentation is available on your website. Our RFP can be yours, and it gives you the necessary paper trail to support and provide the purchasing, provide the documentations for your purchasing decision. And it's a one-time account registration. It's good for life. So now let me show you how to navigate this web page. So first of all, you want to check and see if your agency is registered. You can do this right on our website, sourcewell-mn.gov. When you're on our homepage, look up your account number and then search by a key term. In this example, we're going to use my hometown of Morris, Minnesota. Your home on the prairie is what the billboard says as you drive into town. Right there, let's look at Stevens County. Okay, so you found your entity, great. Make note of that account number that we just highlighted in the upper right-hand corner. What are you going to do with that account number? That's what you're going to need in order to make a purchase on one of our contracts. So now if it turns out that you're not registered, we have an easy solution for that too. We're highlighting what needs to be clicked in order to register yourself. Now, it's very easy, but I would suggest that you talk with your procurement team or whoever oversees the purchasing and work with them to register on our website. Not that you need their permission, at least not from our end. It's more like you want to work with them or at least keep them in the loop. Or if you're empowered yourself to do purchasing at your entity or on behalf of a client, you can certainly register too. It is very simple. So once you've registered, your agency has an account number, you're technically ready to make a purchase. When you've gone to our website and found the contract and supplier you want to use, which I'm going to show you next, you'll work directly with that supplier or their local representative to determine and agree to the awarded contract terms and conditions. Now, the employee benefit world, some of our typical language might need some translation. For instance, The local supplier could be your local insurance agent, broker, consultant, or maybe a regional representative of the company that you'd like to buy something from. And in employee benefits, when we're talking about contract terms, one of those things is the pricing. You need to get a quote. Group employee benefits are rated on the population of people, not necessarily on the product itself. So obtaining a quote is still necessary. And Provident has built out a fantastic landing page, which I'm going to show you how to navigate to. And that page outlines their process for starting a quote, and we're going to show you that. To ensure compliance in your purchase, just always reference your account number and the supplier's awarded contract on any purchase order. And in this space, maybe purchase order isn't the perfect word. Sometimes it's an employer application or a customer intake form, whatever documentation that you need to fill out in order to start the process and to bind the coverage and start to implement all the services. And lastly, on our webpage, you have all the solicitation documents. You have everything that you're going to want and need to download, store in your files, just to justify the purchase and how the decision was made for any potential audit purposes. Next slide, we'll show you how to navigate and find suppliers. So again, back to our homepage, and I'm going to recommend that you use that search tool in the middle of the page. In this case, we're going to check out Provident's profile. So we type in Provident. And you can also use the search tool to look up other products or other brand names, services that to help you find what you're looking for. Okay, so now we found Provident's profile page. There's their contract number. You can see all the products and offerings available on the contract. You can take a look at the documents and find ours, which are now yours, solicitation documents, and their contact information. But something that Provident has done that I think is really smart is they've created their own landing page on their own website. We're navigating to that right now. And on that page, you're going to find details that Provident has posted for your information, all about the contract offerings, the products, services that are available to you. They have some educational videos about Sourcewell and cooperative purchasing in general. And at the very bottom, they actually have built out a form that you can fill out to formally let them know that you're interested in purchasing off their awarded contract, or if you at least want to get a quote process started. It is really as simple as that. So hopefully y'all now know the what, the who, the why, and the how to utilize cooperative purchasing in your buying journey. And with that, Ed, we're going to send it back to you for some question and answers and send some closings.
Sam, will you please turn my video back on?
And while
Yep.
we're working on that,
One
you
moment.
have our contact information. Feel free to reach out to any of us. The contact information on the landing page will get you to me or somebody on my team, and we will help you navigate and answer any questions that we can.
Ed, make sure you unmute. There you go.
Thanks, Sam. So I think we answered the question in the chat. We answered the only question in the Q&A. So I'm going to throw a question out. In the area I live, we deal with a lot of small volunteer departments, and there are a lot of small volunteer departments across the country. And I know for a fact that most of them don't have any kind of, you might find their purchasing requirements in their bylaws, where the fire chief can spend up to $1,000. Anything over $1,000 has to go to a company meeting. If they decide to buy a fire truck, they put a committee together, they put the specs together, and they bring in 4 or 5 manufacturers with demonstrators, et cetera, et cetera. Then they have a big company meeting, and the majority of the membership votes, we're going to buy the XYZ fire truck. They have no contact with the local government whatsoever, because in most cases, the money they're spending is money they've raised on their own through chicken barbecues, bingos, you name it. Okay. So how's this benefit those people? Walk us through a scenario where I don't have a governmental agency telling me how to spend my money.
Yeah.
I see the benefit, but explain it to our listeners.
Ed, it's a great question. We get it a lot. I'm going to take a first stab at this, and obviously Ryan can chime in. But There's a few things to unpack there. First of all, agencies should know that for them to be eligible to spend federal grant dollars, they have to have a documented procurement policy. And so that's a neat little thing to be mindful of, because I'm sure agencies are interested in being able to access federal grant dollars. So they will need to have a documented procurement policy if they want to have use federal grant funds. All right, we'll set that aside for a minute. Maybe they're not worried about that. Maybe they don't have a procurement policy. But the reason it's valuable to them is because, one, they can buy with more confidence knowing that a governmental entity like Sourcewell that has $10 billion in annual sales through their contracts, through over 700 suppliers with 50,000 government agencies buying off these contracts, to know that they have the horsepower of that governmental entity behind these contracts. It means they're probably getting better pricing. It means they have people like Ryan to talk to. If Provident isn't working for them, then they got someone they can go talk to, a governmental employee that can help them with that process. And I say that tongue in cheek because, of course, Provident's going to work for them, but you know what I mean? If they have an issue with their supplier, they've got someone that, the people, Sourcewell work with folks who have contracts at a very high level, right? We're working with the C-suite folks in these organizations. So you have a great point of contact to help you solve problems. And then also, that goes back to that fiduciary responsibility. If you're the fire chief of a volunteer organization, it's really nice to be able to, when you're working with your community, talk about the fundraising and how important that is, to be able to demonstrate, hey, you know what, we're being really careful with how we spend this money that you all are showing up and giving to us by making sure that we're buying things in a responsible way. So they may not be required for that, but it's awfully nice to be able to say that, either personally or through their marketing efforts or their outreach efforts.
Well, and certainly today with the scrutiny everybody's getting, having that RFP, having that process that you could show the public if you get questioned, or even if you do receive some tax dollars, if the local government officials say, okay, you bought all this fire hose, show us how you went about it, you're able to defend yourself. And you folks have already done all that work.
Well, and the nice thing is, even if you say, okay, I don't really want to do the RFP process, I don't care that much about being compliant because I'm volunteering, I don't have to, use a co-op contract. There's no cost to it. It's already in place. So it's a no cost government to government service. And we consider volunteer agencies basically providing a government service. As we know, they're usually a nonprofit organization that operates under a charter by the municipality they serve. And Sourcewell serves nonprofit organizations like volunteer fire agencies. So, there's not really a downside to it. Access the contract, and you've got another little check mark in your file.
And Ryan showed it's very easy to register. And the nice thing about the registration is it doesn't cost anything.
Right. And there's a good chance they're already registered. Sourcewell's been around for a long time. They've had a lot of relationships, especially in the fire service world. So they've loaded a lot of fire service organizations into their accounts because they have partnerships with those chiefs associations people belong to, including volunteer agencies. So you might be surprised that you're already in there because maybe a previous chief registered you.
Okay. Any final comments from you, Crosby, or you, Ryan? I don't see anything in the Q&A, and I don't see anything in the chat. I don't want to short side anybody. All right, we answered the question to Rachel.
Hey, I had a misspelling in my answer. I'm pretty self-conscious about that, but I called it out. So
okay, all right. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A or the chat. So Crosby and Ryan, I want to thank you both for a great presentation. I'm hopeful our listeners will take advantage of the various cooperative purchasing contracts available at Sourcewell. I would hope that Sam and I are going to get hit with a lot of email in the next couple of days saying, hey, can you get us more information on Sourcewell? Maybe even from some folks who didn't listen in tonight. So I want to remind our audience, there'll be a short survey we would like you to complete. Keep an eye open in your email from me. That'll have your certificate of attendance attached. Again, tonight's episode will be uploaded to our website. You'll receive a link in an email within the next day from Sam Please make sure you check your spam or junk email before you send me an email saying, hey, I didn't get my certificate yet. And then obviously go, and this link will be in the stuff that Sam sends out tomorrow. Check out Sourcewell's website at www.sourcewell-mn.gov. All the links tonight will be included in the email that you receive in the next day or so. So please keep an eye open. I want to remind all our listeners on February the 22nd at 7 p.m. we'll be doing a live webinar with Bobby Schneider from the Energy Security Agency to discuss incidents involving lithium-ion batteries. If you have not already done so, please get registered. Until we meet again, be safe for your family's sake. Good night, all.